I'm Mike Russell, manager of our technical integrations here at Total Expert. Today, I'm going to be walking you through some enhancements we've made to our Total Expert integration with Salesforce, our TE for Salesforce, or our Salesforce managed app that you would see. So there's just a handful of improvements here. What we're going to be talking about is the ability to map many Salesforce fields to one Total Expert field, many Salesforce objects to Total Expert's contact and lead entity. And then there's been some changes with the contact grouping, and then just some error handling that I want to walk through as well. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And as you can see, I'm logged into Total Expert, or excuse me, in the Salesforce. So where we will start is by navigating to the Total Expert Setup Assistant. And a lot of this view is going to be very much the same, right? Your connections is going to be the same. Where we're going to focus today is really around the data mapping. So let's go ahead and click into there. Now, historically, you had seen an opportunity to determine if you want single or multiple group mapping. That's no longer, okay? The group mapping will actually be done directly in the contact entity itself. So we'll touch on that here in a second. The first feature we'll look at is actually the many fields to one. So let's go ahead and navigate into the contact entity mapping. I've got an existing mapping here. And you can see I have things like email is writing to email, et cetera. It's very much one-to-one. But let's say I want that email to also write into Total Expert as their work email. So previously you were limited to only mapping one Salesforce, a Salesforce field once. So now you actually have the opportunity to map it multiple times. So suppose you want email to come, the value on Salesforce's side to come into two places in Total Expert, you now have the opportunity to do so. So once you've done that and you select save, from that point forward, any email address in that field will come over both as the email and the work email inside of Total Expert. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the many objects to one Total Expert entity. So when we clicked in here, you likely noticed this interface is a little bit different, right? So you can see I've got my contact mapping for a borrower record type. But suppose you have multiple record types and you want those record types to be treated differently. So you now have the option to map many Salesforce objects to the Total Expert contact entity. Before you could only do one. But let's say we're going to go ahead and say, hey, I've already mapped my borrower record type. Now I want to do a co-marketer record type, right? So now I can do that. And I can say, I can make those changes. Suppose I want to add the data sync control just for co-marketers. You can do that now. You can say, hey, only when certain things happen on a co-marketer sync with Total Expert. Or suppose you might have an actual license number on a co-marketer. You can add those types of things in here now. So what will happen now is with this type of setup, if there's a borrower record type for a contact object, it will be sent over based on this mapping. If there's a co-marketer record type in Salesforce, it will be sent over based on that mapping. But that's just part of it. You can also do any other object. So let's go and say I want to send my Salesforce lead objects over to Total Expert. You can come in here and do that. So I have it set up here for this information to come over this way. So let's say I want all this information to come over like this. You're able to do that. Once you're done with this mapping, again, any new records that are created or updated at that point in time, that will be sent over as a contact record inside of Total Expert. This is also added for the lead entity as well. So you can do multiple objects inside of the lead entity as well. It's not limited to just contacts. Okay, so I did go ahead and I had created a lead earlier today as a contact entity. You see Sloan here. Sloan came over to Total Expert as a contact record based on the mapping that I had. So it works beautifully. Everything, as far as like getting the information back, if an email is sent, those types of things, getting that information back into Salesforce is done very well. The next thing we'll talk about here is the changes in the group mapping. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, once you entered into this entity mapping, you would have been prompted to determine if you wanted to do single or multiple group relationships. We've really moved away from that. And you can do the group mapping directly inside of the contact mapping. So down here below, I have my group mapping, and you can do a couple things. You can determine the group junction object. So again, Salesforce junction objects are really relating two other objects together. You determine what that object is. You determine ultimately what the group on the other side of that junction is, what you want to have as the value. You then determine what are the lookup fields used to actually sync this over with Total Expert. Once you have that information, how this will work is every time a contact group is added inside of Salesforce, it will flow seamlessly over to Total Expert. So I'll show you an example here. I have a contact group relationship called buyer, and I have this name called buyer, and I have it for my contact Fred Johnson. So inside of Total Expert, I have this Fred Johnson has already flown over to Total Expert, and I can see in here when I click in Fred, I can see that he's already been included in the group as buyer automatically from Salesforce. The configuration is much simpler now. The last piece that I'll touch on, and we'll wrap for the day, is just some error handling. So one of the things that we ran into a lot of is, when you have a loan entity mapped, you determine your loan participants. So inside of that loan participant, you can determine who's going to come over on the loan as the borrower. So now that we support multiple mappings in the contact entity, you can actually determine what entity mapping you want to leverage. Okay, so we're going to leverage the contact entity mapping, which is great, and we're going to go ahead and save that. Now, that's great, but what will happen if you delete that contact entity mapping, right? So now if you come in here and try to delete this, you are now met with an error message saying, hey, you have dependencies here on both accounts and loans and wherever else that mapping exists. So before you move forward with deleting and potentially failing exports, you are prompted with an error message. So those are really the big high-level updates with Salesforce. We did some other things around efficiency and some things that make our app work a little bit better for you. But as far as like usability, these were the high pieces, unlocking more opportunities for multiple account map or multiple object mapping, and ultimately leveraging Salesforce, Total Expert for Salesforce in the way that meets your needs. If you have any questions, reach out to your CSM, your TAM, or of course, you can talk to me directly about anything you'd like to. Again, thank you very much.